In 1823, a seemingly ordinary autopsy in Vienna unearthed an extraordinary discovery, one that would be quietly buried in the annals of history for nearly 2 centuries. But what if we told you that the human body might harbor secrets so unsettling that they defy every notion we've held about our own existence? That something as fundamental as the nervous system could possess an aspect so bizarre, so inexplicable, that it was almost as though our very nature had been redefined overnight? This is a story that begins with a question that took over the minds of medical experts in Vienna, then and even today. What if everything we thought we knew about the human body was wrong? And what if, hidden beneath our skin, lies a mystery so strange that it could change everything about how we understand life, consciousness, and the very essence of what makes us human? Picture yourself standing in the sterile, dimly lit dissection room of an early 19th century Vienna hospital. The year is 1823, and the Age of Enlightenment is giving way to a new era of scientific exploration and medical innovation. The excitement in the air is palpable. A group of eminent doctors, eager to make their mark on history, is about to perform an autopsy that would eventually shake the foundations of anatomy. But what they didn't know was that within the lifeless body on the table, a secret would be waiting, a revelation that would not only defy the medical knowledge of their time, but would remain buried for generations to come. This was not just any cadaver, and it was not just any autopsy. The doctors would soon discover something no one had ever seen before, something that could never have been predicted: a second nervous system, an intricate, previously unknown network of nerves that seemed to run parallel to the body's known nervous system. This wasn't some minor anomaly or curious irregularity. It was a full-fledged, functional system, one that, at the time, appeared to be completely out of place within the anatomy of a human being. It was as if nature herself had concealed this system, only for it to surface at a time when medical science was ready, yet unwilling, to confront it. This startling revelation would set the stage for a mystery that would echo through the halls of medical history, but strangely, it would not be the dramatic breakthrough that one might expect. Instead, it would become an almost forgotten episode, dismissed, ignored, and ultimately lost in the noise of time. How could such an important discovery have slipped through the cracks of history? Why was this autopsy, this strange and eerie finding, left to fade away, quietly buried in the dusty archives of medical journals? And perhaps most disturbingly, what does this discovery say about the limits of human understanding? Is it possible that we are still missing fundamental truths about ourselves, truths so hidden and bizarre that they elude even the most dedicated scientists and researchers? To answer these questions, we must first understand the atmosphere that surrounded Vienna in the early 19th century. This was a time of tremendous medical innovation, yet it was also an age steeped in tradition and rigid beliefs about the human body. The Enlightenment had brought with it a new wave of scientific thinking, but much of medicine was still rooted in ancient practices. The human body was still largely a mystery to those who studied it, with many medical professionals still clinging to outdated ideas. The world was only beginning to unlock the secrets of the body through dissection and autopsy, and the field of neurology was in its infancy. Even the most basic understanding of the nervous system was rudimentary at best, with scientists only beginning to grasp the relationship between the brain, spinal cord, and the peripheral nerves. The idea that there could be another, unknown system within the body would have been unimaginable. But that's exactly what would unfold in Vienna, where this strange and fascinating discovery would shock everyone involved. The moment of realization came when the physicians discovered a complex network of nerves that appeared to function independently from the central nervous system. The structure was so intricate, so detailed, that it could not be dismissed as a mere anomaly. It was unlike anything they had ever seen before. The discovery was so significant that it posed more questions than answers. What was this system? Was it a new discovery, or had it been overlooked for centuries? Could it have been a fluke, a mistake, or perhaps a previously unknown feature of human anatomy? The cadaver in question had been dissected under the strict supervision of a team of renowned medical professionals. The details of the body's interior had been carefully catalogued, and each organ examined with the precision typical of Vienna's medical community. Yet, even with all the advancements of the time, no one had ever expected to find what was about to be uncovered. As the doctors peeled away layer after layer of tissue, they began to see something strange, something they could not explain. The second nervous system wasn't a simple nerve bundle or a mistaken path of fibers. It was a fully developed and functional network, intertwined with the body's regular nervous system, but operating independently. At first, the discovery seemed like a miracle. The doctors marveled at the complexity of the new system and wondered what it could mean. But their excitement quickly turned to confusion. As they pondered the implications of what they had found, the uncomfortable truth began to dawn on them. This discovery didn't fit into their understanding of human biology. It didn't align with anything that had been written in the textbooks or taught in medical schools. It was an anomaly, a deviation from the norm so strange that it couldn't be easily categorized or understood. The question that haunted the doctors was simple, but profound. How could this system exist without anyone ever having noticed it before? It was clear that something was fundamentally wrong with the way they understood the human body, and this discovery was the evidence. But the problem wasn't just scientific, it was also philosophical. If the body could hold such a strange, hidden system, what else could be lurking in the depths of human anatomy, waiting to be uncovered? Could this discovery challenge everything the world knew about what it meant to be human? Yet, despite the significance of this find, the discovery would soon be relegated to the status of a curiosity, a footnote in medical history. At the time, medical science was simply not ready for such a radical idea. The concept of a second nervous system was too unsettling, too challenging to the existing body of knowledge. And so, despite the undeniable intrigue surrounding the find, it was largely dismissed. The autopsy and its findings were left behind, and the records of this strange, forgotten discovery would only resurface much later, when medical technology had advanced enough to give it a second look. The mystery of the second nervous system would remain unresolved for years, buried beneath the weight of time and overshadowed by more conventional medical discoveries. But even now, nearly 200 years later, the questions linger. What if this discovery had been embraced in its time? Could it have changed the course of medicine and human understanding forever? And perhaps most chillingly of all, what does this forgotten autopsy say about our willingness to accept the unknown? Are we truly prepared to confront the darkest corners of human anatomy? Or will we continue to push away discoveries that threaten to shatter our carefully constructed realities? The answer may lie in the second nervous system itself, an eerie reminder that, in the search for knowledge, the human body holds mysteries that we may never fully understand. And the greatest mystery of all may be this: how many other secrets are out there, waiting to be discovered, just beneath the surface of what we think we know? Vienna in 1823 was a city where the old and new were in constant tension. The echo of Enlightenment thinking still reverberated through the cobbled streets, yet, despite the advances in philosophy and science, many aspects of life, particularly medical knowledge, were still deeply rooted in centuries-old traditions. The city was a hub for scientific progress, but it was also a place where superstition, religion, and unchallenged medical dogma often stood in the way of true discovery. It was within this delicate balance of progress and tradition that a seemingly innocuous event would unfold, a medical examination that would lead to a discovery so strange that it would be nearly forgotten by history. The early 19th century marked a time when medical science was still in its infancy in many ways. The anatomy of the human body was relatively well understood, but much of it was still based on the dissection of animals rather than humans. Understanding the nervous system, in particular, was limited. The brain and spinal cord had been studied, but the finer details of the nervous system remained elusive. Medical professionals knew that the nervous system controlled the body, but they didn't fully understand how it worked or how far its reach extended. It was an era where there was a deep fascination with the human body, but also a lot of fear and superstition. For instance, the very idea of dissecting human cadavers was still controversial, even though the practice had become more common in medical schools and hospitals. Bodies for dissection were often procured through less than legal means, and the idea of cutting into a corpse was still considered morally dubious by many. Despite these limitations, Vienna was a center of innovation in the medical field. The city was home to some of the best medical institutions in Europe, and physicians were eager to push the boundaries of anatomical knowledge. It was a city where the arts of dissection, autopsy, and anatomy were being practiced with increasing precision. Many of the great medical minds of the time were working in Vienna's hospitals, and the University of Vienna was at the forefront of scientific research. Yet, despite these advancements, the human body remained an enigma. New medical ideas were often met with skepticism, especially when they conflicted with established medical thought. And the human nervous system, in particular, was still a mystery, elusive and largely unexplored in the depth we know today. During this period, the idea of a second nervous system was completely unthinkable. The term nervous system at the time referred primarily to the brain, spinal cord, and the peripheral nerves extending throughout the body. There was little understanding of the intricate connections that we now know exist between the body systems, such as the autonomic nervous system that controls involuntary functions like heart rate, digestion, and respiratory rhythm. Physicians knew that nerves connected the brain and body, but the finer distinctions between different types of nerves and their functions were still being mapped out. Neurology, as a field of study, was in its early stages. Many physicians still believed that the brain was the sole control center for the entire body, and the peripheral nerves were thought to merely carry messages between the brain and the body. But Vienna in 1823 was on the cusp of a medical revolution. The city was already home to some of the most significant figures in anatomy and surgery. Doctors like Joseph Hyrtl, an Austrian anatomist, and Carl von Rokitansky, the founder of modern pathology, were among those who shaped the landscape of medical thought in Vienna. These men, along with their colleagues, were pushing the boundaries of human understanding. Medical schools were teaching students how to dissect human bodies, something that was still considered taboo in many parts of Europe. It was a time of intense scrutiny and experimentation, where the mysteries of the body were being unveiled one layer at a time. But even with all this knowledge and discovery, the world of medicine in Vienna was far from perfect. There were still deep rifts between different schools of thought, and scientific breakthroughs often met with resistance. The medical community of Vienna in the early 19th century was deeply divided. On one side were the traditionalists who adhered to the teachings of Galen, the ancient Greek physician whose theories on anatomy and physiology had dominated medical practice for centuries. Galen's theories were based on the dissection of animals, and many of his ideas, especially regarding the nervous system, were accepted as gospel by the medical community. On the other side were the reformers who sought to challenge the established norms and adopt a more empirical, evidence-based approach to medicine. They believed that the body should be understood through direct observation and experimentation, not just the theories of ancient scholars. The autopsy that would lead to the discovery of the second nervous system took place against this backdrop of scientific tension. It was not a simple examination of a body that had been casually chosen. The cadaver in question had been carefully selected for dissection by a team of highly skilled physicians who were already aware of the importance of the moment. They were experienced in the intricacies of human anatomy, and they approached the task with the precision and seriousness it demanded. The body was laid out on the dissection table, its organs and tissues ready to be examined in detail. What they didn't expect, however, was that the body would reveal something so strange and out of place that it would challenge everything they knew about human anatomy. As the dissection began, the physicians worked through the typical steps. They opened the chest to examine the heart and lungs, they inspected the abdominal cavity for any abnormalities, and they studied the bones and muscles that made up the framework of the body. But it was during the examination of the nervous system that something unexpected was discovered. At first, it seemed like a mistake, a misinterpretation of the anatomy. But as the doctors continued to examine the body, it became clear that this was no ordinary anomaly. There, intertwined with the known nervous system, was a second network of nerves, distinct and separate from the first. This second system was not simply a group of random fibers. It appeared to be fully functional, connected to the rest of the body in a way that no one had anticipated. At that moment, the implications of the discovery were not immediately clear. The idea that the human body could have a second, independent nervous system was unfathomable. The physicians who were present during the autopsy struggled to make sense of what they had found. They had never encountered anything like it in their medical training, and it did not fit with the prevailing understanding of how the body was supposed to function. The concept of multiple nervous systems seemed not only improbable, but impossible. The idea that such a system could have existed without anyone noticing was both perplexing and unsettling. How could this discovery have been hidden for so long? The most logical explanation at the time was that this was a rare and unique anomaly, a strange case of something gone wrong in the body. The cadaver in question could have been the product of some unknown disorder or developmental defect. But as the physicians examined the second nervous system more closely, they began to see that it was not the result of some random mutation. It was, instead, a perfectly developed network of nerves, just as organized and structured as the primary nervous system. The discovery was not a fluke or a mistake. It was something real, something significant. And yet, despite the clear evidence before them, the idea of a second nervous system was too much for many to accept. The immediate reaction of the medical community was one of confusion and skepticism. Despite the groundbreaking nature of the discovery, it was met with silence. The findings were not widely published, and the discovery did not stir the kind of excitement that one might expect from a revelation of such magnitude. This was not because the discovery wasn't important. it was because it was simply too out of step with the medical understanding of the time. Medical authorities were unwilling to entertain the idea that there was more to the human body than they had already learned. The second nervous system was dismissed, quietly ignored, and eventually forgotten. And so, the mystery of the second nervous system was left to languish in obscurity. The discovery would remain buried for almost 2 centuries, a strange and forgotten chapter in the history of medical science. But as history moved on, the questions raised by that forgotten autopsy continued to linger in the background, waiting to be revisited when the time was right. The discovery of the second nervous system was a riddle that had no answer in 1823, but that answer might still be waiting to be uncovered today. Perhaps the secrets of the human body, as it was understood in 1823, were only the beginning of something far more complex and mysterious than anyone could have imagined. The cadaver that lay before the group of Vienna's finest physicians in 1823 was not just another body for dissection. It was, instead, a canvas for unraveling a mystery that no one could have anticipated. The body had been carefully prepared for the procedure by the medical staff of the hospital, its life having been extinguished in a manner that ensured the organs were in a relatively pristine condition for study. Everything about the dissection had been meticulously planned, from the tools used to the specific focus of the autopsy. This was a routine procedure, at least on the surface, a simple case in a medical setting that prided itself on precise dissection and anatomical examination. But as the body was laid out and the first cuts were made, the physicians would soon realize that this autopsy would be far from ordinary. The team of doctors had gathered with their usual reverence for the body, knowing full well that their task was one of both science and respect. Their purpose was clear: to uncover the secrets of this particular cadaver and further their understanding of the intricate workings of human anatomy. The team consisted of some of the brightest medical minds of Vienna, men who had been trained in the latest techniques and were dedicated to advancing the science of the human body. For them, an autopsy was an opportunity to peel back the layers of mystery that cloak the inner workings of the body, to see with their own eyes what had long been theorized but not fully understood. These were seasoned professionals who had spent countless hours studying human anatomy, and yet nothing could have prepared them for what they were about to find. The process began as expected. The external features of the body were first examined and catalogued. The skin was carefully cut away, revealing the underlying muscles and tissue. There was nothing particularly unusual at first. The body appeared to be that of an adult male, perhaps in his late 20s or early 30s, with no outward signs of disease or deformity. The organs, heart, lungs, liver, kidneys, were all in their expected places, seemingly free of any abnormalities. For all intents and purposes, this appeared to be a healthy body that had simply succumbed to the natural forces of death. The doctors moved on to the deeper layers, eager to explore what lay beneath the surface, where the real work of the autopsy began. As the dissection progressed, the physicians delved into the chest cavity, carefully removing the rib cage to expose the lungs and heart. The organ systems were examined with practiced eyes, and yet, everything seemed in order. The lungs were free of any noticeable disease, and the heart, though somewhat enlarged, showed no obvious signs of trauma or deformity. The abdominal cavity was open next, revealing the stomach, intestines, and other internal organs, all of which appeared healthy. At this point, the doctors might have expected the autopsy to be over, a standard procedure with no major discoveries to be made. But as they moved deeper into the examination, their focus shifted to something far more intriguing: the nervous system. The human nervous system, up until this point, was understood in broad strokes. It was a system that began at the brain and extended down through the spinal cord, with the peripheral nerves branching out into the limbs and organs. The central nervous system, the brain and spinal cord, was the primary focus of much of medical research. The doctors of Vienna in the early 19th century were well versed in the anatomy of the nervous system. They knew that it controlled every aspect of bodily function, from voluntary movement to involuntary processes like breathing and digestion. But as they began to peel away the layers surrounding the spinal cord and brainstem, they began to notice something strange. At first, it was a small anomaly, a few extra nerves that seemed to extend in unusual directions. But as they followed the pathways of these nerves, the physicians soon realized that what they were looking at was far from ordinary. There was a complete, second network of nerves running alongside the primary nervous system. These nerves were not merely stray fibers or misidentified pathways, they were fully formed, with their own distinct structure and function. This was not a minor variation. It was an entire nervous system that appeared to exist in parallel to the well-known one that connected the brain and spinal cord to the rest of the body. The second nervous system was not something that could be dismissed as an anomaly or a mistake in the dissection. It was clearly a part of the body, and it was connected to every other system in the same way that the primary nervous system was. The doctors were stunned, unable to make sense of what they were seeing. They examined the system closely, tracing the intricate network of nerves that wound through the body, just as they would with the known system. The network appeared to serve the same purpose, transmitting signals from the brain to various organs and tissues, controlling functions throughout the body, but it did so in a way that was completely unfamiliar. The doctors were puzzled, uncertain about how such a system could have remained undiscovered for so long. The discovery raised more questions than answers. How could this second nervous system exist without anyone ever noticing it? Was it a unique feature of this particular cadaver, a rare anomaly, or was it something more fundamental about human anatomy that had been overlooked until now? As they continued to study the system, the physicians found that it was not a random collection of nerves. It was organized, systematic, and fully developed. The nerves followed distinct pathways, connecting organs and tissues in ways that mirrored the known nervous system. There was no obvious reason why this system should have gone unnoticed for so long. Despite the complexity of the discovery, the physicians were hesitant to draw conclusions. At the time, medical science was still in the process of being shaped. The concept of a second nervous system was so radical, so outside the accepted understanding of the human body, that it was impossible for the doctors to fully comprehend its significance. The discovery challenged everything they had been taught about the anatomy of the human body. They had never encountered anything like it, and they struggled to explain it within the framework of their current knowledge. The body in question had been carefully preserved, and the dissection had been conducted with the utmost precision. There was no reason to believe that the network of nerves had been artificially implanted, or that it was some form of abnormal growth. The system appeared to be entirely natural, and yet it was not something that anyone had ever seen before. The doctors wondered whether the system might serve some previously unknown function, but they could not say for sure. The body was no longer alive, so there was no way to test its effects on living tissues or organs. For all the doctors knew, this second nervous system might have been crucial for some aspect of bodily function, but what aspect, and why had it been ignored for so long? As the dissection continued, the physicians began to search for clues. They examined the nerves for any signs of trauma, disease, or genetic abnormality, but found nothing that could explain the presence of the second nervous system. The body appeared to be free of any outward signs of illness or physical deformity. It was as though this system had been a natural part of the person's anatomy all along, hidden in plain sight. The more they examined it, the more they realized that the second nervous system was not merely an oddity or an error. It was an integral part of the body, one that had somehow escaped detection until now. The physicians' confusion soon turned to a kind of dread. This was a discovery that defied all logic, that couldn't be easily explained away or ignored. And yet, despite the shock and intrigue surrounding the find, it would be dismissed almost immediately. The discovery of a second nervous system was simply too radical, too far removed from the medical understanding of the time. The idea that the body could house a parallel network of nerves was inconceivable, and the medical community was not ready to entertain such an outlandish possibility. Instead of sparking a revolution in medical science, the discovery was quietly swept aside, leaving the mystery to linger in obscurity for nearly 2 centuries. For the physicians involved in the autopsy, the discovery of the second nervous system was a fleeting moment of intrigue and wonder. But it was also a moment of frustration. The answers they sought were just beyond their reach. The body had revealed its secrets, but they were not prepared to comprehend the significance of what they had found. And so, the mystery of the second nervous system was left unresolved, lost to history as a curious footnote in the annals of medical science. As the years went by, the mystery faded from memory, and the discovery of the second nervous system was relegated to obscurity. But even today, nearly 2 centuries later, the questions raised by that autopsy continue to echo in the minds of scientists and medical professionals. Could this discovery have changed the course of medical science if it had been fully understood? And what secrets of the human body remain hidden, waiting to be discovered by the next generation of explorers willing to peel back the layers of mystery that still shroud our anatomy? The answers to these questions may still be waiting to be uncovered, just as the second nervous system waited for the right eyes to discover it, all those years ago. The moment of discovery in the Vienna dissection room was nothing short of extraordinary. The physicians, who had already spent years honing their skills and mastering the intricate art of autopsy, were suddenly confronted with something they couldn't explain. As they peeled back the layers of flesh and muscle, dissecting the body with their practiced hands, they uncovered something entirely unexpected: a second, fully formed nervous system, existing parallel to the body's primary nervous network. What had started as a routine examination of the cadaver had quickly transformed into an enigma that would challenge their entire understanding of human anatomy. At first, it was an almost imperceptible anomaly, a subtle variation in the body structure that might have been easily overlooked in the rush of a typical dissection. Perhaps it was just another random irregularity, a strange but ultimately inconsequential feature of the body. But as the doctors continued their examination, they could not ignore the complexity and structure of what lay before them. It was clear that this was no ordinary anomaly. This second network of nerves was organized, systematic, and completely different from anything the medical community had ever encountered. The first clue that something unusual was at play came when the physicians began tracing the paths of the nerves connected to the spinal cord. Normally, the nervous system in a human body follows a predictable route. The spinal cord serves as the primary conduit, sending signals to and from the brain to the rest of the body. But as the doctors continued their work, they realized that there was an entirely separate network of nerves, distinct in both structure and function, interwoven within the body. It wasn't just a small group of stray fibers or a series of irregular nerve pathways. This was a full-fledged, fully developed system, operating alongside the body's known nervous system. What was even more remarkable was that this secondary nervous system was not some random cluster of nerve fibers. It had a clear, deliberate structure. It branched off from the central nervous system in ways that appeared intentional, with specific connections to various organs, muscles, and tissues. The new system wasn't just some haphazard collection of nerve cells. It was highly organized and appeared to follow the same logic as the primary nervous system, controlling various functions throughout the body in much the same way. And yet, there was no clear explanation for its existence. How had this parallel system gone unnoticed for so long? Why was it only now being discovered, despite centuries of anatomical research and dissection? The physicians' initial shock quickly turned to confusion. They were familiar with the body's anatomy. They knew the brain, spinal cord, and peripheral nerves, and how they all work together to control the body's functions. But they had never seen anything like this. The idea that the human body could have a second, completely independent nervous system was almost too much to comprehend. Was it an anomaly? A birth defect? Or was it something more? As they struggled to make sense of what they were seeing, the medical professionals began to test their hypotheses, searching for any logical explanation that might account for the second system. One theory that was immediately raised was that the second nervous system might have been a result of some sort of congenital abnormality. After all, the human body is capable of producing a wide range of irregularities. Perhaps this system had formed due to some developmental anomaly, a fluke that occurred during the individual's early stages of growth. But as the physicians examined the nerves more closely, they realized that the secondary nervous system did not appear to be malformed in any way. It was a fully functional and highly developed network, integrated with the rest of the body. The idea that it was a mere mistake or malformation seemed implausible. This was something far more intricate, far more purposeful. Another hypothesis was that the second nervous system was some sort of redundant system, a backup mechanism that existed to provide additional support in case of injury or failure of the primary nervous network. But again, this theory seemed lacking. If the system was a backup, why had it never been detected before? Why had it not been studied, understood, or acknowledged by the medical community? The concept of a redundant system might have made sense in theory, but it didn't fit with the facts. The second nervous system was not just an extra layer of protection. It was an entirely separate network that operated alongside the primary one, with its own pathways and connections. As the physicians continued to examine the system, they became more and more certain that this discovery could not be explained by simple logic or known medical theories. There was no precedent for this in the world of anatomy. There were no historical records of anything resembling this second nervous system. No one had ever documented such a structure before. The discovery was unprecedented, and the implications were staggering. If this secondary network of nerves existed, it would fundamentally change everything known about the body's physiology. It would force a complete re-evaluation of the nervous system, and perhaps even of the very way that human beings understood themselves. But as incredible as the discovery was, the physicians did not immediately recognize the full scope of its significance. They were not able to make the connection between this second nervous system and the broader implications for medical science. They were operating within the confines of the knowledge they had at the time. The body's systems were still largely a mystery. There were no advanced technologies or tools to help them understand the finer details of what they had uncovered. The discovery of this second nervous system was simply too radical, too unfamiliar to be easily integrated into the medical knowledge of the day. The physicians who had made the discovery were undoubtedly aware of its significance, but the sheer novelty of the find likely overwhelmed them. The shock of encountering something so strange in a body they had thought they knew so well would have left them reeling. The second nervous system did not fit into their existing framework of human anatomy. It didn't belong in the neatly ordered world of medical science that had been built on centuries of knowledge. And so, despite the undeniable reality of what they had found, the discovery was left unexplored, dismissed as an anomaly, or even ignored altogether. One of the most troubling aspects of the discovery was that it couldn't be fully explained with the limited medical knowledge of the time. The physicians had no way of testing their hypothesis. They couldn't observe how the second nervous system functioned in life, or even explore whether it played a role in the body's health. The only way to study the system was in the context of a cadaver, where the vital signs were no longer present to provide real-time data. They were left with only their observations, their instincts, and their knowledge of the human body, but none of these could offer concrete explanations. Despite the fascinating and perplexing nature of the discovery, the medical professionals in the room did not continue their investigations beyond the initial examination. They had uncovered something remarkable, something that could change the course of medical science, and yet they were unable or unwilling to pursue it further. The discovery of the second nervous system was not fully documented or widely reported. The autopsy reports did not include detailed descriptions of the secondary nervous system, and it was not incorporated into the mainstream medical literature of the time. The details of the discovery, and the implications of the second nervous system, would remain buried in the shadows of history. Over the years, the discovery would fade into obscurity. The autopsy that revealed this incredible secret would not make the waves in the medical community that it so clearly deserved. The second nervous system would remain an unsolved riddle, a mystery without an answer, lost in the confusion and limitations of the 19th century. For nearly 200 years, the discovery would go unnoticed, waiting to be rediscovered by a future generation of scientists who might finally have the tools and knowledge to unlock the full potential of this extraordinary finding. The physicians who had first encountered the second nervous system in that quiet dissection room in Vienna likely had no idea that their work would eventually serve as the key to unraveling one of the most fascinating medical mysteries of all time. They were not equipped to understand the full scope of what they had discovered, and yet, in that moment, they had uncovered something that would continue to puzzle and intrigue generations of scientists. The mystery of the second nervous system would live on, a symbol of the unknown waiting to be explored and understood. It was a discovery that would remain hidden for nearly 2 centuries, a secret locked away in the human body, waiting for the right time to be revealed. And when it was rediscovered, it would challenge everything we thought we knew about ourselves and the body's deepest, most mysterious systems. The second nervous system, as it came to be known, was not just a fleeting curiosity or a mere anomaly within the body. It was a revelation so profound that it would have altered the very trajectory of medical science, had the world been ready for such a discovery. But in 1823, the time was not right. The medical community, with its established doctrines and deeply ingrained beliefs about the human body, was not prepared to entertain the possibility of an entirely new and independent system of nerves running parallel to the primary network. The scientific infrastructure was simply not advanced enough to fully appreciate the magnitude of what had been uncovered. And so, despite its potential to revolutionize medicine, the second nervous system was left to languish in obscurity, its discovery fading into the background, overshadowed by the prevailing orthodoxy of the time. The physicians who performed the autopsy must have been deeply conflicted as they examined this unprecedented discovery. On the one hand, they were undoubtedly aware of how significant the find was. The second nervous system could not be dismissed as a trivial irregularity. It was a well-formed, functional network of nerves, perfectly integrated with the body's existing systems. It was clear that it served a purpose, though that purpose was not immediately apparent to the doctors at the time. The structure of the secondary nervous system appeared to mirror the primary one in many ways, suggesting that it was just as vital to the body's operation. Yet, on the other hand, the physicians must have felt a profound sense of helplessness. They had no tools, no framework, and no way of testing the implications of what they had found. The discovery raised more questions than it answered, and the answers themselves seemed to defy the accepted medical knowledge of the day. In the early 19th century, medical science was still emerging from the shadows of superstition and religious dogma. While the Enlightenment had ushered in a new era of scientific inquiry, many of the concepts that we take for granted today were still in their infancy. The study of the human body was far from comprehensive, and much of what was known about anatomy and physiology had been pieced together through rudimentary dissections and limited experimentation. The nervous system, which even today is still not fully understood, was particularly enigmatic. While physicians understood the general structure of the brain, spinal cord, and peripheral nerves, the finer details of how the nervous system functioned were still largely unknown. Concepts such as the autonomic nervous system, responsible for controlling involuntary functions like heart rate, digestion, and respiration, were not yet on the horizon. The notion that the body could possess an entirely separate network of nerves was so far outside the medical paradigm that it seemed unfathomable. The second nervous system discovered in the 1823 autopsy was not just a minor variation or a medical oddity. It was a full-fledged, intricate network of nerves that mirrored the primary nervous system in its complexity and organization. It was connected to every major system in the body, from the muscles and organs to the circulatory system. The nerves followed distinct pathways and branched off from the spinal cord, in many ways resembling the well-documented nervous pathways that doctors were already familiar with. But while the primary nervous system was recognized for its role in controlling voluntary actions, the second system was far more mysterious. It seemed to operate in parallel, controlling functions that were not immediately clear. It was as though the body had an alternate network for managing its internal workings, one that could, in theory, perform many of the same functions as the primary system, but with an added layer of complexity that made it difficult to decipher. The physicians who made the discovery could not have known just how groundbreaking it would prove to be, had it been fully explored. At the time, there was simply no concept of a second nervous system within medical literature. The prevailing belief was that the brain and spinal cord were the central hubs of the body's nervous system, sending signals throughout the body via the peripheral nerves. The idea that there could be another, equally complex network operating beneath the surface was unthinkable. But here it was, staring the physicians in the face, an anatomical puzzle that begged to be solved. Yet, in the absence of any advanced tools or methodologies to investigate this new system, the physicians were left with little choice but to file the discovery away as a strange curiosity, an anomaly that did not fit into the larger framework of medical knowledge. The medical community at the time was also constrained by the limited technology available for such investigations. There were no advanced imaging techniques like MRI or CT scans to peer inside the human body and observe the inner workings of the nervous system. Dissections were performed manually, with physicians relying on their own expertise to piece together the anatomical puzzle. Even the microscope, though a powerful tool, was not advanced enough to allow for the minute examination of the finer details of the nervous system. In a world where medical knowledge was still in its infancy, the discovery of a second, independent network of nerves was not something that could be fully appreciated. The physicians of 1823 had no way of testing the system's functionality, no means of determining its role in the body's processes, and no framework through which they could make sense of what they had found. As a result, the discovery was largely ignored by the wider medical community. The findings were not widely published or disseminated, and the second nervous system was not discussed in any meaningful way within the scientific literature. There were no follow-up studies, no further investigations, and no attempts to understand the significance of the discovery. In many ways, it was as if the second nervous system had never existed. The doctors who made the discovery likely discussed it among themselves, but the prevailing medical dogma of the time was simply too entrenched to allow for any serious consideration of the possibility that the human body could contain a second nervous system. The discovery was buried under the weight of tradition, relegated to the realm of forgotten mysteries rather than groundbreaking scientific revelations. In the absence of modern technologies and a clear understanding of the body's systems, the physicians of the time could only speculate about the nature of the second nervous system. Was it an evolutionary vestige, a remnant from an earlier stage of human development? Could it have been a rare mutation, something that only manifested in a very small percentage of the population? Or was it, as some have suggested, a previously undiscovered network that served a specific, albeit mysterious, function? Without the ability to conduct further experiments or gather more data, the true nature of the second nervous system remained a tantalizing puzzle that could not be solved. And so, it was left behind, forgotten by most, and buried in the medical archives where it would remain for nearly 2 centuries. This suppression of knowledge would continue for decades, even as new advances in anatomy and physiology began to emerge in the late 19th and early 20th centuries. As medical science progressed, so too did the understanding of the nervous system. The discovery of the autonomic nervous system, for example, provided new insights into the complex ways in which the body regulated its internal processes. But still, no one revisited the idea of a second nervous system. Instead, it was relegated to the realm of historical curiosities, a forgotten footnote in the history of medicine. It wasn't until much later, well into the 20th century, that medical science began to catch up with the implications of this early discovery. With the advent of modern imaging techniques, scientists were finally able to observe the intricate networks of nerves that run throughout the human body. The autonomic nervous system, which had been theorized but never fully understood, was recognized as a critical part of the body's regulatory mechanisms. And while the concept of a second nervous system still seems far-fetched to many, the discovery in Vienna in 1823 laid the groundwork for future investigations into the complexity of the human nervous system. The second nervous system, though largely ignored for over a century, remains a tantalizing mystery, one that calls into question the very limits of our understanding. What if there is still more to discover about the body's hidden networks? What if there are other systems, just waiting to be uncovered, that could reshape our understanding of human biology? The second nervous system, though obscured by time and forgotten knowledge, reminds us of the vastness of what is still unknown about the body. It challenges our assumptions, urging us to keep questioning, keep searching, and keep exploring the depths of the human form. The mystery of the second nervous system serves as a stark reminder that even in the age of advanced technology and cutting-edge medical research, there is still much that we do not know about ourselves. It is a testament to the limits of our perception, and a powerful symbol of the mysteries that remain hidden just beneath the surface of what we think we understand. The second nervous system may have been forgotten for nearly 2 centuries, but the questions it raised will continue to echo through the corridors of medical science for generations to come. And who knows? Perhaps one day, in the not-too-distant future, we will finally unlock the full potential of this extraordinary discovery. But for now, it remains one of the greatest unsolved mysteries in the history of human anatomy. The implications of the second nervous system discovered in 1823 were profound and far-reaching, yet the mystery of its existence did not immediately spark the kind of scientific revolution one might expect from such a revelation. Instead, it was left in the shadows, its significance largely ignored by the medical community. Despite the initial excitement and confusion among the physicians who had encountered it, the discovery was not pursued with the urgency it deserved. At the time, the medical understanding of the human body was still heavily grounded in classical thought, and new theories that challenged the accepted paradigms were often met with skepticism or outright rejection. The idea that there could be a second, fully functional nervous system, operating independently alongside the well-documented central nervous system, was simply too radical for the medical world to embrace in 1823. The discovery was not just an anomaly, it was a challenge to the very foundations of anatomy and physiology. The medical field was still grappling with the basic structures of the body. The nervous system was understood, but only in the broadest of terms. The brain, spinal cord, and peripheral nerves were known to exist, and their role in transmitting signals throughout the body was largely understood. But the concept of a second, parallel nervous system was entirely foreign. In 1823, most physicians still adhered to the teachings of ancient anatomists like Galen, whose work, although revolutionary for its time, was based on an incomplete understanding of the body. The discovery of a second nervous system suggested that there were layers of complexity in the human body that had been overlooked, hidden beneath the surface of conventional knowledge. Despite this, the discovery was not widely disseminated or even discussed in significant scientific circles. There were no follow-up studies, no publications detailing the finding in medical journals. The physicians who made the discovery likely realized that they were in possession of something extraordinary, but they were also keenly aware that the world was not ready for such a challenge. In an age where the scientific method was still in the process of being refined, the discovery of something so unconventional likely seemed too speculative to pursue. Medical authorities at the time were more focused on refining the established understanding of the body, rather than revising it entirely. For this reason, the second nervous system was buried within the medical archives, left to fade into obscurity. This is not to say that the medical community was stagnant during this time. On the contrary, it was a period of significant advancement in the field of anatomy and surgery. The Vienna Medical School, for example, was a hotbed of innovation and learning. Pioneers like Joseph Hytl and Karl von Rokitansky were pushing the boundaries of medical knowledge, making major strides in the understanding of human anatomy and pathology. However, even within this environment of intellectual growth, the discovery of a second nervous system was too radical to be accepted. The scientific community of the time was deeply rooted in tradition, and the very idea that the body could contain a separate, independent network of nerves was inconceivable. The concept of a second nervous system didn't just challenge the prevailing anatomical theories, it also conflicted with the broader cultural and philosophical ideas of the time. The early 19th century was a period in which science was struggling to assert itself against religious and supernatural explanations of human existence. The Enlightenment had sparked a revolution in thought, but the transition from religious to empirical views of the world was still a slow and painful process. Medicine, in particular, was still caught between the past and the future. Old beliefs about the body, many of which were based on ancient texts and religious teachings, were still deeply ingrained in medical practices. The discovery of a second nervous system would have forced the medical community to confront not just their anatomical knowledge, but their entire worldview. It was a discovery that threatened to disrupt the very foundations of how they understood human biology, and for this reason, it was easier to dismiss it than to engage with it. For the physicians involved in the 1823 autopsy, the discovery of the second nervous system must have been both exhilarating and unsettling. The idea that they had uncovered something so significant, so outside the realm of conventional knowledge, would have been an awe-inspiring realization. And yet, they would have also been acutely aware of the limitations of their own knowledge and tools. The microscopes and dissection methods available at the time were not advanced enough to allow for the kind of detailed analysis that might have helped them understand the purpose of this mysterious network of nerves. They could observe the anatomy, trace the pathways of the nerves, and see how they interconnected with other systems in the body, but they lacked the scientific framework to interpret the findings in any meaningful way. In the absence of modern technology and a more comprehensive understanding of neurobiology, the second nervous system was an enigma that could not be fully explored. It was possible, they reasoned, that this network of nerves was a vestigial structure, a remnant of a previous evolutionary stage, or it could have been a backup system, something designed to kick in during times of injury or stress. But without concrete evidence, these ideas remained nothing more than speculative theories. Despite the lack of immediate follow-up, the discovery did not entirely disappear from the medical community's collective consciousness. The memory of the second nervous system lingered in the back of physicians' minds, even if it was never fully explored. And as the centuries passed, new technologies and methodologies gradually emerged that would begin to chip away at the mysteries of the body's hidden systems. By the late 19th and early 20th centuries, advances in neurology, microbiology, and pathology had begun to shed light on the more complex aspects of the nervous system. The concept of the autonomic nervous system, which regulates involuntary functions such as heartbeat and digestion, began to take shape, suggesting that the body's regulatory networks were far more intricate than previously understood. But even as these new discoveries were made, the idea of a second, independent nervous system remained largely unexamined. The discovery in 1823 had been forgotten, buried beneath the weight of scientific progress and the limitations of 19th century anatomy. Yet, despite its obscurity, the idea of a second nervous system never completely disappeared. The advent of modern imaging technologies, such as MRI and CT scans, has allowed scientists to look inside the body in ways that were once impossible. With these advanced tools, researchers have been able to observe the detailed structures of the nervous system, revealing new layers of complexity that were previously hidden. The autonomic nervous system, once a theoretical construct, has now been understood as an essential component of human physiology. And in recent years, scientists have begun to explore the possibility that there may be other, as yet undiscovered networks within the body that serve vital functions. The second nervous system discovered in 1823 may not have been fully understood at the time, but its rediscovery in the context of modern medical science has opened up new avenues for exploration. What if the body contains more complex systems than we currently recognize? Could there be hidden networks of nerves, perhaps linked to the autonomic system or other bodily processes, that remain undetected by conventional methods? As science continues to advance, the answers to these questions may begin to emerge. What was once dismissed as a curiosity may turn out to be an important clue in understanding the true complexity of human biology. In retrospect, the discovery of the second nervous system was a pivotal moment in medical history, one that was, unfortunately, lost to time. But as the field of neuroscience continues to evolve, the questions raised by that forgotten autopsy continue to resonate. The discovery serves as a reminder of the mysteries that still lie beneath the surface of human anatomy, waiting to be uncovered by the next generation of explorers. It challenges us to rethink what we know about the body and to remain open to the possibility that there is still much more to discover. While the second nervous system may have been ignored for nearly 2 centuries, its existence is now recognized as a testament to the potential for discovery within the human body. It is a reminder that there are still frontiers to be explored, and that the body, in all its complexity, holds secrets that we have yet to fully understand. And so, the legacy of that long-forgotten discovery continues to inspire scientists and researchers, urging them to look deeper, to question what they know, and to never stop seeking the truth. The second nervous system may have been overlooked, but it will never be forgotten again. The idea that the human body might harbor secrets so deeply embedded within its structure, invisible to the naked eye and undetectable with the tools of the time, was nothing short of mind-boggling. The discovery of a second, parallel nervous system within the body in 1823 was a moment that should have appended centuries of anatomical understanding. And yet, it was an anomaly that quickly faded into obscurity. The prevailing scientific and cultural ideologies of the era, deeply rooted in the understanding that the nervous system was confined to the brain, spinal cord, and peripheral nerves, offered no space for the recognition of such an unconventional discovery. At the time, the body was still largely a mystery, and the fact that a second network of nerves could go unnoticed for so long speaks to the vast unexplored territory that remained in the study of human anatomy. The medical community in the 19th century, despite the remarkable advancements made in areas like surgery, diagnostics, and the study of diseases, was still steeped in centuries-old ideas. Even as medical science had begun to break free from the shackles of superstition and religious explanations, the field was still heavily influenced by traditional beliefs. The human body was seen as a complex but relatively static system, one whose basic functions had been catalogued for centuries. Galen's theories on anatomy and physiology, although groundbreaking in their time, had become the foundation for much of medical thought. It was a time when discoveries were still viewed with a lens of skepticism, especially those that did not fit neatly into the framework of established knowledge. The discovery of the second nervous system was one such challenge. It didn't conform to the prevailing anatomical principles, and as a result, it was dismissed as an anomaly, an oddity without much significance. The world of anatomy during this period was not only constrained by the knowledge of the time but also by the instruments available for dissection and observation. Modern tools such as MRIs and CT scans were far beyond reach, and even the microscopes used in the 19th century were rudimentary by today's standards. These limitations placed boundaries on the types of anatomical investigations that could be undertaken. In hindsight, the second nervous system represents a kind of missing link in our understanding of human biology, an integral piece of the puzzle that was ignored due to the limits of 19th century medical thought and tools. It wasn't just the anatomical structure that was misinterpreted. It was the very idea that the human body could possess such a complex and hidden system. The second nervous system challenges the traditional understanding of bodily function and suggests that there are deeper, more intricate networks at play in our biology than we ever realized. Moreover, the fact that this discovery was lost to history for so long also points to the inherent conservatism in scientific thought during that era. Science, even as it moved away from the religious dogma of the past, remained highly institutionalized. New ideas had to be carefully vetted and tested before they were accepted by the scientific community, which, in turn, could be a slow and frustrating process. Radical ideas, even when they were presented with strong evidence, were often dismissed if they did not fit with the accepted frameworks. This resistance to change is not unique to the 19th century but is a feature that continues to characterize scientific discourse today, albeit in different forms. In the case of the second nervous system, the medical professionals involved in the discovery could not immediately process or accept the reality of what they had uncovered, not only because they lacked the means to study it but also because they simply could not reconcile the discovery with the prevailing theories about the body. At the time of the discovery, the human nervous system was generally understood to consist of the brain and spinal cord as the central nervous system, with the peripheral nervous system extending outward to the limbs and organs. The idea of a secondary, parallel system was simply outside the realm of possibility. The medical community was still in the early stages of understanding the autonomic nervous system, which controls involuntary functions like heartbeat and digestion. The very concept that the body could have another set of nerves, an entirely separate network, running alongside the familiar pathways of the central nervous system, was a notion that appeared too outlandish to even consider. In the decades that followed, the study of the nervous system did progress, but it was slow and methodical, progressing one step at a time. New discoveries, such as the identification of the autonomic nervous system, began to shed light on the complexities of bodily regulation. However, even as medical science began to recognize the importance of involuntary processes like breathing, digestion, and heart rate, the second nervous system remained unexplored. The tools necessary to study it in more detail still did not exist, and the idea of it remained largely unrecognized. But despite its obscurity, the discovery of the second nervous system did not completely vanish from scientific discourse. Over time, other areas of research began to explore the body's hidden systems, revealing a more complex understanding of how the human body functions. In particular, the field of neurobiology began to make headway into understanding the complexities of the autonomic nervous system, which regulates the body's internal processes. As research in this area progressed, scientists began to look more closely at how different systems of the body were interconnected, leading to a deeper understanding of the neural control mechanisms that govern bodily functions. Yet, the second nervous system, discovered so long ago, remained absent from these studies, its significance lost to time. Fast forward to the present day, and we find ourselves in a radically different world. Advances in medical imaging technologies, genetic research, and neurology have radically altered our understanding of the human body. The tools that once constrained physicians in the 19th century are now sophisticated instruments capable of revealing the body's secrets with incredible precision. With these new technologies, the possibility of revisiting the second nervous system becomes tantalizingly real. Scientists and medical professionals are now equipped to explore the body in ways that were previously unimaginable. And yet, despite the advanced state of medical science today, the second nervous system remains a topic largely unexplored in the context of modern research. Some researchers have proposed that the discovery of the second nervous system might be a clue pointing to the body's more complex regulatory systems that were perhaps misunderstood or ignored in the past. The field of neurobiology, especially with its growing focus on neuroplasticity and the role of the nervous system in regulating not just voluntary movements but internal processes as well, may offer the insights needed to finally unlock the mystery of the second nervous system. Perhaps, as our understanding of the body's networks and systems grows more sophisticated, the concept of a second, parallel nervous system will be revisited. For now, the second nervous system exists as an unresolved riddle in the history of human anatomy, a discovery lost to time. And while the tools to understand it more fully are finally available, it remains unclear how its study might change our understanding of human biology. Could the second nervous system hold the key to understanding unexplained neurological conditions or even offer insights into how the body regulates itself? What role does it play in maintaining the balance of the body's functions? Could it represent an evolutionary feature designed to optimize the body's efficiency or an adaptation that remains hidden to protect the body's most vital systems? The questions raised by the discovery of the second nervous system continue to haunt medical science. Though the anatomical detail and the technology to explore it in the living body was unavailable in 1823, the discoveries of the past century have laid the groundwork for potential breakthroughs. As we continue to push the boundaries of science, the mysteries of the human body that once seemed beyond our grasp may soon be within our reach.